What happens when a royal prince walks onto a late-night comedy show expecting royal treatment, only to find a host who refuses to bow? In just 34 seconds of one shocking comment, Prince Harry's appearance on the Greg Gutfeld Show went from awkward tension to complete chaos, ending in the most dramatic exit in talk show history. The studio lights were hot that night, the audience packed into their seats, excited for what they thought would be a fun interview. A British prince on an American comedy show. What could go wrong? Everything. It all started when Prince Harry settled into the guest chair across from Greg Gutfeld. The leather squeaked as he adjusted his position. The studio audience was buzzing. A real prince. This was supposed to be fun, light, entertaining. But from the first question, something felt off. Greg leaned forward with that signature smirk. So, Prince Harry, thanks for being here. I gotta ask, what brings a British royal to a show like mine? Aren't you used to more formal settings? The audience laughed. It was playful. But Harry's face tightened. His jaw clenched. Well, Greg, I thought it would be good to connect with real people, you know? Have a real conversation for once. Something genuine. Something honest. Greg raised an eyebrow. His head tilted slightly to the side. Real people? As opposed to what? Fake people? Are you saying your usual circles aren't real? Because I know some folks in Britain who might take offense to that. Harry shifted in his seat. The chair suddenly felt uncomfortable. That's not what I meant at all. Then what did you mean? Greg pressed, his tone still friendly, but with an edge now, and sharp, pointed. I just mean, everyday Americans, working people, people who aren't caught up in all the protocol and nonsense and formality of royal life. Right, Greg nodded slowly, letting the words hang in the air. So, you're here to grace us common folk with your presence, to come down from your castle and mingle with the peasants. That's very kind of you, very generous. The audience went quiet. You could feel it. That shift. That moment where friendly banter crosses into something sharper. Something dangerous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Harry forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't say that. You're twisting my words. You kind of did, though, Greg replied, leaning back in his chair, getting comfortable. You came on a show watched by millions of hardworking Americans and basically called your entire life nonsense. These same Americans, by the way, a lot of them can barely make rent. Their tax dollars, historically speaking, helped fund the very royal family you were born into through various agreements and trade relationships. I don't think you understand the point I'm trying to make, Harry started, his voice rising slightly, defensiveness creeping in. Oh, I understand perfectly, Greg interrupted smoothly. But I don't think you do. See? The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny you're about to mention. You have no idea what real pressure is. You want to talk about pressure? Let's talk about the single mother working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Let's talk about the veteran who came home with PTSD and can't get help because the system's broken. Let's talk about the small business owner who just lost everything because of economic policies they had no control over. That's pressure. Harry's face flushed. Red crept up his neck, spreading across his cheeks. That's incredibly dismissive of mental health struggles. Just incredibly dismissive. Mental health is real, Greg. Just because someone has money doesn't mean they don't suffer. Depression doesn't care about your bank account. Absolutely true, Greg agreed, his tone softening for just a moment, a brief pause in the assault. Mental health is real. Depression is real. Anxiety is real. Suffering is real. I'm not denying any of that. But you know what else is real? The single mom I just mentioned who can't afford therapy, even though she desperately needs it. The veteran sleeping on the street who can't get the help he earned through his service. Those people suffer too, Harry. They suffer without the safety net you have. They suffer without the resources, without the platform, without the million-dollar deals to talk about how hard their life is on streaming services. Harry stood up slightly, his body lifting from the chair, then sat back down hard, visibly frustrated. His hands gripped the armrests. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is precisely why I left that life behind. This kind of attitude, this lack of empathy, this refusal to see people as human beings with real feelings. Lack of empathy. Greg's voice sharpened, his eyes narrowing. I have empathy for people who actually struggle. What I don't have patience for is someone who had every advantage in life, every privilege, every opportunity, complaining to people who have none of those advantages. You had the best doctors, the best therapists, the best everything. And you're sitting here telling people who can't afford a doctor's visit that your life was hard. You don't know anything about my life. Harry's voice was loud now, echoing through the studio, bouncing off the walls. Several audience members jumped at the sudden volume. I know enough, Greg said calmly, his voice steady, controlled, a stark contrast to Harry's rising emotion. I know you grew up in Buckingham Palace. I know you went to the finest schools money could buy. I know you had nannies, tutors, staff waiting on you hand and foot. I know you were handed opportunities most people dream about their entire lives and never get. And I know that instead of being grateful for any of it, you've spent the last several years complaining about it to anyone who'll listen. Harry's hands gripped the armrests of his chair tighter. His knuckles turned white. My mother died when I was 12 years old. 12. I had to walk behind her coffin while the entire world watched. Cameras in my face, people crying, the whole world mourning, and I was just a child. A little boy who lost his mother. Don't you dare sit there and tell me I have nothing to complain about. Don't you dare. The studio went silent. Completely, utterly silent. You could hear the hum of the cameras, the buzz of the lights. Someone in the audience coughed. Greg paused, just for a beat. Now just for a moment of respect. That was a tragedy, Greg said quietly, his voice lower now, gentler. A genuine, heartbreaking tragedy, and I'm genuinely sorry for that loss. No child should have to go through that. No one should lose their mother that way, especially not in front of the world. But millions of kids lose parents, Harry. Millions of kids suffer trauma. They lose parents to cancer, to car accidents, to violence, to war. They grieve in poverty. They grieve without support. They grieve, and then they get up the next day and go to school or work because they have no choice. They don't all get to process it in luxury. They don't all get therapy and time off and the space to heal. They definitely don't all get to make millions telling everyone else how hard they have it. Unbelievable, Harry muttered, shaking his head slowly, his eyes wide. Absolutely unbelievable. This is disgusting. What's unbelievable, Greg continued, leaning forward now, his elbows on his desk, is that you think you're relatable. You genuinely think coming on shows like this, sharing your story, being vulnerable, whatever you want to call it, makes you one of us. But you're not. You're not one of us. You never will be. You left your family, abandoned your country, walked away from your duty, and now you lecture the rest of us about service and sacrifice from your mansion in California. The audacity of that is what's unbelievable. Harry stood up this time. Really stood up, his full height, towering over the desk. I've served my country. I was in the military. I went to Afghanistan. I put my life on the line. I saw combat. I did my duty. What have you done? What have you sacrificed? The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath. This was getting personal now. Really personal. Greg didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. I've never claimed to be a hero, Greg said evenly, his voice measured, calm. I'm a talk show host. I make jokes. I give opinions. I comment on the news. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't wrap myself in the flag and then run away when things get tough. Can you say the same? This is ridiculous, Harry said, his voice shaking now, emotion cracking through. Absolutely ridiculous. You invited me here just to attack me. This was a setup from the beginning. I invited you here to have a conversation, Greg corrected, his finger pointing at Harry. A real conversation. An honest conversation. You're the one getting defensive because someone finally isn't treating you like royalty. Someone finally isn't bowing and scraping and telling you how brave you are. Newsflash, buddy. This is America. We fought a war so we wouldn't have to do that. We don't bow to kings here. We don't kiss rings. We don't treat people special just because of their last name. Maybe that's your problem, Harry snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. Maybe that's America's problem. Maybe this country could learn something about respect, about deference, about recognizing when someone is simply better than you. The audience booed. Actual booing. Loud, angry, visceral booing. People shouted. Someone yelled something that couldn't quite be made out. Greg raised his hands to quiet them down, but it took a moment. The crowd was angry now. Better than us? Greg repeated, his eyebrows raised. Did you really just say that? Harry's face went pale, then red again. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? Greg demanded. Because it sounded like you just called yourself better than my audience. Better than the people who watch the show. Better than Americans in general. I meant about manners, Harry backpedaled, but his voice lacked conviction. About basic human decency and respect for others. Respect is earned, Greg said, standing up now too. Both men on their feet, facing each other across the desk. Not inherited. Not given because someone was born in a castle. Earned. Through actions. Through character. Through how you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling. And you haven't earned mine. Harry's face went from red to almost purple. His eyes bulged slightly. You arrogant, small-minded little man. You sit here in your little studio with your little show and your little audience, and you think you have the right to judge me? Me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? The audience erupted again, this time in shock. Little show, little audience, little studio, insults upon insults. Greg just smiled. That same signature smile, but bigger now. More genuine, because Harry had just handed him everything he needed. There it is, Greg said softly, almost gently. There's the real you. Not the reformed prince who cares about mental health and veterans and all the good causes. Not the humanitarian. Not the modern royal. The entitled brat who looks down on everyone who isn't royal. The spoiled child who never grew up. The man who thinks he's better than everyone else just because of the family he was born into. I don't have to listen to this, Harry said, his hands shaking now as he reached for his microphone pack. He ripped it off his belt, yanked the wire, pulled the mic off his collar. The sound tech jumped as the equipment clattered and sparked. I don't have to sit here and take this abuse. You're right, you don't, Greg agreed, calm as ever. The door's right there. No one's stopping you. In fact, I'll have someone show you out if you can't find it. You're going to regret this, Harry said, pointing at Greg with a shaking finger. You're going to regret every word you've said tonight. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any idea what I can do to you? To this show? To your career? Yeah, Greg said, still calm, still collected, hands in his pockets now. You're a guy who just called my show little. My crew works incredibly hard on this show. My writers craft jokes every single day. My producers put in endless hours. My cameramen, my sound people, my staff, they all work their tails off to make this show happen. My audience tunes in every single night. Loyal, dedicated, real people with real lives. They're not little. They're the backbone of this country. They're the people who make America work. And you just insulted all of them because your feelings got hurt. Harry looked around the studio. Really looked. Every face stared back at him. Cameramen, producers, audience members. No one was on his side. Not one person. "This is absurd," Harry said, his voice cracking. "Completely absurd." You're all absurd," says the guy throwing a tantrum on live television, Greg replied, sitting back down. "Says the prince who ran away and now wants sympathy." That was it. That was the final straw. Harry's hands balled into fists. His body tensed. "How dare you?" Harry hissed. "How dare you speak to me this way? I am a prince. You are nobody." "I dare because this is my show," Greg said. "In my country, you don't get special treatment just because of your last name. You don't get to demand respect you haven't earned." "I'm done here," Harry announced, looking into the camera. "This show, this host, this production is beneath me. Beneath anyone with dignity." "Well," Greg said, gesturing to the exit, "don't let the door hit you on the way out, Your Highness. Though I'm sure you're used to people opening doors for you." The audience laughed hard. Harry turned sharply, nearly knocking over a plant. He stormed toward the exit, footsteps heavy, angry. The audience watched in stunned silence. "Wait!" Greg called out. Harry stopped, turned around. "Did you need something?" Harry asked coldly. "Yeah," Greg said, holding up a small British flag from his desk. "You forgot this. Might want to remember where you came from." Harry's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched. "Keep it," he spat. "I don't need reminders. I don't need anything from you." "Suit yourself," Greg shrugged, tossing it aside. Harry turned, moving faster, nearly jogging. But he stopped at the door one final time. "You know what your problem is, Greg?" Harry called across the studio. "I'm sure you're going to tell me," Greg replied. "You're jealous. You're jealous because no matter what you do, you'll never be anything more than this. A comedian behind a desk. I was born important. You had to beg for it." The studio went dead silent. Greg walked to the front of his desk. "You're right about one thing," Greg said quietly. "I did have to work for everything. And you know what? I'm proud of that. I'm proud I built this. I'm proud people watch because they want to, not because they have to. I'm proud I earned my spot. Can you say that about anything in your life?" Harry's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. "That's what I thought," Greg said. "Now get off my stage." Harry's face twisted. Pure rage and humiliation. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing." "Security," Greg called calmly. Two men in black suits appeared. They didn't touch Harry, just stood there. "I'm leaving," Harry shouted. "I don't need your security." "Just making sure you find the exit," Greg said sweetly. Harry grabbed the door, yanked it open hard enough to bang the wall. "This will ruin you," Harry yelled. "I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." "Go ahead," Greg said. "My audience knows who I am. Question is, do yours?" Harry opened his mouth for another comeback, but nothing came. He was out of ammunition. He slammed the door so hard the set shook. A picture frame fell off the wall. The audience sat frozen. Greg turned to the camera, straightened his tie with exaggerated care, and smiled that signature smile. Bigger than ever. "Well," he said, his tone light, almost cheerful. "That was fun. That was really fun. More fun than I've had in a while, actually." The audience exploded. Absolutely exploded. Cheering, laughing, applauding, whooping. They were on their feet, giving Greg a standing ovation. The kind of ovation usually reserved for the end of the show. People were pumping their fists. Someone whistled. "We'll be right back after this break," Greg said, struggling to be heard over the noise. "Assuming our next guest knows how to behave like an adult. Assuming our next guest understands that respect is a two-way street. Assuming our next guest doesn't think they're royalty." The laughter continued, rolling in waves, as the show cut to commercial. The red light on the camera went dark. Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling, phones out, already texting, already making calls. They were replaying the footage on monitors, watching it again, already knowing this would be everywhere by morning. Twitter would explode. News sites would cover it. Think pieces would be written. This was the kind of moment that defined careers. In the hallway outside the studio, Harry paced back and forth like a caged animal, his security team trying to calm him down. His face was still red, still flushed. His breathing was heavy, labored. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Did you hear him?" Harry said to no one in particular. To everyone. To the walls. "Did you hear the way he spoke to me? The disrespect? The absolute gall." His team nodded, exchanged glances, unsure what to say. What could they say? They'd all watched it happen. They'd all seen him lose control. They'd all witnessed the meltdown. "I want statements prepared," Harry demanded, pointing at his publicist. "I want responses ready. I want talking points. I want everyone to know that man ambushed me, that this was a setup, that I was attacked." But even as he said it, even as he planned his counterattack, even as he tried to spin the narrative, Harry knew the truth somewhere, deep down. He'd lost. Badly. Publicly. Completely. He'd come onto someone else's show, insulted their audience, insulted their work, called them little, and then thrown a tantrum when called out. No amount of PR could fix that. No statement could erase what millions of people had just watched. Back in the studio, Greg was talking to his producers during the commercial break. They huddled around him, everyone talking at once. "That was intense," one of them said, his eyes wide. "That was necessary," Greg replied firmly. Someone needed to stop treating him like he's special. Someone needed to say what everyone's been thinking. "You don't think you went too hard?" another producer asked, genuine concern in his voice. Greg shook his head. He came here expecting everyone to kiss his ring, to nod along while he complained about his privileged life, to tell him how brave he is. "I did what any honest person would do. I called him out on it. I said what needed to be said." The producers nodded. They'd seen the audience reaction. They'd felt the energy in the room. They knew Greg had read the room perfectly. This wasn't a mistake. This was genius. "How much of that can we use?" someone asked, already thinking about clips, about edits, about social media. "All of it," Greg said without hesitation. "Every single second. Don't cut anything. So let people see exactly what happened." When the show came back from commercial, the energy in the room was electric. The audience was still buzzing. Something big had just happened. Greg addressed the audience directly, leaning forward, speaking to them like friends. "So, that happened," he said with a laugh. "I'm sure some people will say I was too harsh, too mean, too whatever. But here's the thing. We live in a country where no one is above criticism. Not presidents, not celebrities, and definitely not princes who chose to leave their country and then complain about it." The audience cheered again, longer, louder. "I don't hate the guy," Greg continued. "I don't even dislike him. But I think he needs a reality check. Someone needed to say what a lot of people are thinking. And if that makes me the bad guy in his story, I can live with that." More applause. Greg had his audience behind him completely. "Now, let's move on to people who actually matter," Greg said. "Real people doing real things. People who work hard, who struggle, who don't complain to magazines." The show continued. More guests came. Jokes were made. But everyone knew what the headline would be. Everyone knew what clip would go viral. Prince Harry, the man who'd walked away from royalty, had just been kicked off a comedy show for acting too royal. The irony was perfect. In the control room, producers were already cutting the segment, preparing it for social media. This wasn't just good television. This was legendary television. Back in the studio, Greg wrapped up the show with his usual sign-off, thanking his audience, his crew, his guests. Well, most of his guests. And to our special guest who left early, Greg added with a wink. Thanks for stopping by. Doors always open if you want to come back and try again. Maybe with a better attitude next time. The audience roared with laughter one final time. As the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, Greg sat at his desk for a moment, alone with his thoughts. He'd just kicked a prince off his show, made him leave, embarrassed him on national television. And Greg didn't feel bad about it. Not even a little bit. Because sometimes someone needs to say what everyone's thinking. Someone needs to stop pretending. Someone needs to treat people like people, not like royalty. Tonight, that someone was Greg Gutfeld, and his audience loved him for it.